This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion.
I imagine just about everyone at some stage of the game says to themselves, I want to write a book, or I can imagine writing a book, or damn, it would be cool to have a book. I don't think I ever thought that until one day. And then when I thought it, I said to myself, I must do it. Thought, do, action, boom. That was my process. Maybe a little unusual. I have no clue. My guest today comes through a roundabout recommendation. Joshua Lisec. He's a ghostwriter. He writes books for people, for well-known people. A lot of them, like a whole bunch of them. Now, I originally found out about Joshua through Scott Adams. Scott had done some work with Joshua, and I thought, this is a really interesting potential conversation for this podcast. Now, I've had Tucker Max on, talking about his business, Scribe, where he helps people to write books. That business apparently has really taken off for Tucker. But this conversation with Joshua, I thought, this could be really cool because it's one-on-one. He's kind of like a one-man band. He just cranks out books, cranks out content. That's awesome. So if you've ever wanted to know a little bit about the book writing process, how it all works, and maybe how it can work for you, join me for a little bit of a conversation down the path, the book writing path. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Joshua Lisec. You are my first guest in the history of this show who I'm going to get a chance to just talk about the process of a book appearing on Amazon or in Barnes & Noble. There is quite a bit of process here, meaning the idea, the concept, the writing, the marketing, the whole nine yards, and it never ends. And I'm a guy who's done, I was trying to figure this out, between 5 to 7. And I say that because my first book had 5 editions, and several of those editions have been complete rewrites to almost make them an entirely different book. That's my story. 4 publishers, all kinds of scars. You already know there's all kinds of scars on me.
Yeah. That's part of the trade here.
Where I want to start, just to give you a little bit of background, because I think this will be interesting for you. I had a blog up from 1996 to 2003. Decided to write a book. Maybe I decided to write it in 2002. That first book came out in 2004. What I did was I took all of my blog entries. I had some good content, lots of followers. I thought this stuff's vetted. This will make a great book. Took all kinds of other articles and ideas, put it into a big pile, hired a lady and said, I don't know how to write a book. Here you go. Here's some money. And I gave her a lot of money, too much money. Gave her a year. She came back with something that, because I basically gave her no instruction. I didn't know what I was doing. She came back a year later with something, but it wasn't something I could use. So at that moment in time, I then had to learn how to write very fast because I told everybody I was writing a book. I didn't know anybody like you at the time. I probably would have never learned how to write if I would have met a guy like you. Do you hear something like that occasionally?
Yeah. Usually I'm not the first ghostwriter that an author comes across, or an executive or a founder or somebody who needs a lot of content written. They need it written well, they need it written fast. But I'm usually the last ghostwriter that they end up with. And the reason why is in my profession of ghostwriting, there's a lot of this feels too good to be true attitude where if I could completely delegate the vast majority of my content creation from my 300-word blog posts and short form content and newsletters on up to the 300-page book, that would free up 5, 10, 20 plus hours from my week. But I haven't found anybody who's able to understand what my voice is and authentically recreate it on the page. So when they find me and we begin working together and I send the first draft of chapter one. Usually they're a little nervous because a lot of them have been down this road before and they know that feeling of grand disappointment and almost embarrassment. There's no way I could ever publish this under my name. You're kidding me. But when they read what I've written, they say to me, Joshua, I can't even tell I work with a ghostwriter. It sounds exactly like me, but it's the best way I could have said it.
Hold that thought for a second. Let's establish something. How many books have you ghostwritten?
I'm currently working on number 55, number 56, number 57, and that's on top of roughly 2,000 pieces of content for articles, social media posts, emails, etc.
You look like a young guy.
I am, relatively, I suppose.
When you sleep, or has this really just become for you so much practice, so much work at this particular skill that for other folks that don't have the skill, they don't understand how clear it looks to you? I'm not saying you think it's easy, but it's more clear when you look at a project compared to someone who doesn't have the skill set.
That's a good way to put it. What makes it easier is project management, adding that in. There's a software that I use that helps me manage everything, and it dramatically opens up my bandwidth. I mean, probably at least by a factor of 5 of how many clients I'm able to take on relative to your average freelancer or ghostwriter out there who's starting every project from scratch. That is the least efficient way, but it's also the easiest way and therefore the most common way. And so most ghostwriters are doing 1, maybe 2 books a year, maybe a speech here or there, but not I, said the Joshua.
What is the word count on the typical book that you do? I like to say that in my experience so far, the typical business book with some depth is coming in at around 80,000 words.
Yeah, 80,000 is a little long for a general trade nonfiction book. General trade being like what you would find at the bookstore. Typically, you're seeing 40,000 to 75,000 words. You'll sometimes see 80,000 when the author has a little bit more to say, but 80, 85,000, that's a little bit rarer these days unless it's an established author who the publisher knows is worth the investment in the additional word count and therefore cost of production for the book.
Complete side tangent, won't go there for more than a few seconds, but just to make you laugh, my 5th edition of my first book clocks in at 220,000 words.
You have a lot to say.
That's why I said I feel it's not fair for me to say, okay, I've got XYZ number of books, because you just told me the number could be 40,000. Okay, 40,000 into 220,000. That's 5 books right there. That's not fair.
Maybe it is exactly 5 books. I see that often with the first draft where the author's like, I want to say this and I want to say this. And often it's decades of research, work, legacy, their life's work that they want to bring to the page. What would I not include? Usually, 95% of what you could say, you probably shouldn't in the book. And that is defined by what it is that your category of readers desires. And that very first step, uniquely amongst other ghostwriters, is we start with market research, both qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative meaning what does the data say? Qualitative, the touchy-feelies. The quantitative, that is where we do our keyword research, using some tools to find out what's been proven hot on Amazon. So what are the exact keywords related to your subject matter that people are searching for and then buying books based on those keyword searches?
Let's use an example. For example, something like investments. You're going to go in, if someone comes to you and they say, I'm an investment professional, they want you to ghost this book for them, they've got all this content. Your first step is to not just trust your gut that that particular person who wants to author their first book has great content. They could, but that's not your first step. You're going straight to trying to figure out what the data says on Amazon right now.
Exactly. Estimated searches per month going back on a 12-month average. For example, investing for beginners gets approximately 4,970 searches per month on Amazon. If you were writing, let's say, that investing book, you'd want to look at some different keywords. I'd love to see anything that is above 100. Statistically significant would be defined as anything over 100 searches a month. When we like to see low competitive scores, we're kind of getting into the weeds here of search engine optimization best practices.
It's okay.
But that's really what we look at. Are people buying the book you're going to write? If not, don't write it. There are plenty of authors I talk to. We look through a few dozen different keywords and it's 0, 0, 0, fewer than 100, fewer than 100. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of action here. Now, for categories like investing, where there's extraordinary competition, also extraordinary reward, we have to get a little creative and find out what are some tertiary topics that people are searching. For example, this is an interesting one. Investing in real estate with no money down. That is, in fact, a keyword people are searching. It has a statistically significant search volume of 156 on average. The back end of Amazon and other platforms give you roughly 15 to 20 spots for keywords. So in this process, we identify your 15 to 20-ish keywords that have statistically significant searches every month, a low competitive score, and based on the purchase data, solid average monthly royalties for those authors who are showing up at the top of search results. This answers the question. If you write a book on X, will it sell simply because it's the most relevant for the search results? For the people who are going to be buying books anyway, they might as well buy yours. And that's the quantitative. That's part of getting your book in front of the market. The other one, the qualitative, is making sure it's good as defined by the people who've already bought books. The likeliest customers are people who've already made purchases. And for something like books, if you've bought a book on investing in real estate, there are a great chances that you will probably buy more books on real estate investing. So what do? We mine the thousands upon thousands of reviews on other investing in real estate books, previous investing in real estate books, particularly the popular ones, so that we can get the biggest look at the data. Here's a tip for all market research for any product, or even service actually. Look at the 2, 3, and 4-star reviews. Both Entrepreneur and the New York Times have published interesting data on the fact that consumers distrust 1-star and 5-star reviews generally, assuming 1 stars are haters or competitors posting fake reviews, or the 5-star reviews are basically people who are super, super excited because they're the spouse or mom, some sort of existing relationship, even that goes against Amazon's policies, interestingly enough. Those 2, 3, and 4-star reviews, those neutral ones, where you'll find things like this. I purchased this book on investing in real estate with no money down because I was hoping that it would teach a really fast way to acquire properties and flip it within a short period of time. All I got on that topic was a short chapter at the very end. The first 150 pages were about investing mindset. I didn't buy a book on mindset. What does that tell us if we're writing a book on investing in real estate? Well, if this complaint about 150 pages of investor mindset shows up across multiple reviews, several reviews, that tells us ain't no way we're writing about mindset in this book.
It's a really interesting perspective. There's a side of me, and I know where you're going with this. I'm not sure the audience knows yet, but because you're not talking about taking all this information and making a cookie cutter SEO book that just kind of beats the system, because you've also, I've seen this in your work, you've got a process that really says, hey, let's make a thought leader masterpiece. You're looking to have a great book that people want to keep and people want to read. I mean, that's your foundation. But at the very beginning, when you're doing your research, you got to do this quant stuff. Otherwise, you could be left holding the bag, which is what you're laying out.
The purpose of search engine optimization is organic sales, in that there's already a marketplace and there's already customers wandering into it. You might as well create something that's relevant for the market of people that already exists. Otherwise, it's a vanity project. No vanity project is a thought leadership masterpiece. However, done right, something that's written for a relevant existing market that they can perceive as a new tool. I'm borrowing from the Jobs to be Done framework, which I use with every author's project right now. When I say tool, that's what the research allows you to do. So for those who may be unfamiliar with the Jobs to be Done framework, it goes a little like this. And I'm going to apply it to readers and books because it's relevant. Readers buy books to get jobs done in their lives. For example, The job to be done for investing in real estate with no money down is a little obvious. The job to be done is I want to acquire property without putting tens of thousands of dollars down. I want to put down the least amount of capital as possible, even if that would be a big fat zero. So that's the job that I want to get done. And there's other aspects to that. It's a functional job, as they would say, but it's also emotional, meaning I don't want to feel like I'm risking everything. I would want to look for a tool, in this case, a book, to help get that job done. As a reader, I'm going into the market, I'm going into Amazon, I'm going into Barnes & Noble, I'm going to the bookstore even, in the library, audible.com, because half of all bestsellers nowadays, it's the audio edition. That alone is the best-selling edition, just because people are now the podcast generation. We've been spoiled by podcasts now. Back to jobs to be done. As I'm looking at my search results for investing in real estate with no money down, everything about the title and the subtitle of your book must make it clear that your tool is a new tool, meaning it's not a rewrite of what's been out there before. It's not old news, but it's a new, exciting, proven, uniquely helpful and valuable system that is going to get the job done that I want to get done of investing in real estate with no money down. And it's going to remove financial risk, as much of that as possible. I'm going to feel that I can trust the author. That's the point of the research, is to allow you, or enable you rather, to write a book that has the highest perceived value as a tool to get important jobs done. Books that are vanity projects or legacy books where the author just wants to share their life story with 100 close people, there's not a whole lot of value that they have to focus on making obvious. The term would be outcome-driven innovation. If you're just sharing your story and, hey, here's some tips and lessons that worked for me in my career, they're pretty much ubiquitous in every Tony Robbins or John Maxwell book, but I like them too. People who buy that book are going to feel like they have an old tool. Basically, repackage Tony Robbins or repackage John Maxwell. A lot of authors come to me with initially an idea that they've had for years. Unfortunately, it's an old tool, meaning I've read that book before. Whether it's about peptides or professional photography, that book's already been written. So part of my process and going through the research is to identify the unique value that their book idea can deliver to the marketplace, unique and new, and that consumers can say, okay, I haven't seen that before. That's really cool.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on the example that I want to toss out about doing all this research, the quant homework to start, but I think Tim Ferriss is the one that really laid the foundation for this kind of process in his work. He really, really dove into these kinds of issues that you're laying out. I think it was one of the trailblazers. Would you concur with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the best practices that he teaches in the 4-Hour Work Week is running with headlines that prove it out. Now, in his case, he actually would recommend creating ads and seeing which headline, which product name gets the most clicks and then judging it by that. But this is an alternative. It's looking at, well, what are people already searching and then already buying? It's a tool that didn't exist back when the 4-Hour Work Week came out, but it's the same principle, is selling what people are already buying. That is probably one of the easiest jobs in business, so long as what you release into the marketplace, customers can say, oh, wow, this is unique, this is new, this is valuable, this is worth the price of the author's ask.
I'm thinking of an example right now that hits the sweet spot for unique. He was on this podcast a while back, actually before the book title I'm about to mention. This would be Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That book, I've not had a chance to speak with him about his process, but I'm sure there was a lot to it. What's really interesting for me is I saw this in a Singapore bookstore last year, walked in and saw Mark's book, and he's selling a ton of these things, obviously still, second book out. Maybe there's a third one now that kind of gets at the same thing. All props to him. But it was so sort of sad for me to walk into that Singapore bookstore. I mean, look, these are some of the wealthiest people in the world, most successful people in the world, some of the most successful people in the world. And here's Mark's book up there on the shelf, this great Japanese bookstore in Singapore. and like 5 other books that have now got the F-bomb in the title. And I was just laughing. I was like, okay, they might sell some of those things. Mark's book is going to win. That's going to be the thought leadership book. It's not going to be the other F-bomb books that succeed. They might sell some copies, but it's so transparently copycat to think, God, I would not want to be one of those authors trying to copy Mark Manson's title.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, that you have the new tool, the unique positioning of Mark's book, and then you have essentially the rewrites of that book, where it's the author's perspective trying to be like that person. If the marketplace is aware, or if your readers, your ideal readers even, are aware of those other books, then it's like, oh, okay, well, I mean, I've already read that book. Now, Mark himself could have made that mistake and called his book something like Authentic Living, which it would be accurate, but you've read that book. Everybody's read that book. We don't care. You can find the information on Google. That is Googleable. If the information in your book is easily found from Google or from Wikipedia, you do not have a book. I was talking to an author about this last night in the health and wellness space. He sent me the manuscript that he's been working on, actually, his first ghostwriter, who's unable to continue the project. He shared the manuscript with me, and literally 30,000 words of Wikipedia entries. It sounds like it was written by a medical student, which it was. The author is a bombastic personality, very high energy. I'm reading his quote unquote final draft of his book that quote unquote needs polished up before it can go to press. It would be an embarrassment to his brand.
A lot more than polish probably is what you thought.
I did a quick review. I analyzed, okay, what are the deal breakers in here? And then what are the recommendations for rectifying them? And then I concluded, you need to rewrite this book. This will diminish your credibility. This will annihilate your reputation if you publish this, even with some proofreading, because there are some lines that were all but lifted word for word from Wikipedia with a few prepositional phrases added so that the sentence would look longer and more sophisticated. And I'm like, yeah, this is the problem with most ghostwriters, is they don't have any experience in your industry. So what they create for you is based on a quick search of what's on the front page of Google or Wikipedia, which makes you look like a total noob to your peers and to your customers. It's sad, but that's the number one reason a lot of people shy away from ghostwriters, is because they don't know what they're doing, because they haven't done it before. That's why the best ghostwriters, the highest demand ones, are those of us who have dozens of books. We've literally written the book on just about every topic out there. It's not new to us when we come into a new project.
To clarify for the audience, for those people that are sitting out there thinking, oh, I don't know about this conversation. It sounds like Mike has written his books. I have written all my books. Joshua represents some very big names. He helps them get to the New York Times bestsellers list. Maybe some people have kind of a taste of like, God, is that really how the sausage is made in the book business? Okay, Joshua, the floor is yours. What percentage of New York Times bestsellers are written by ghostwriters?
Roughly 80 to 90%.
That number actually shocked me when I saw it. I shouldn't have been shocked. I should have been thinking, well, that's just, if some famous wealthy person out there doesn't have the time, but they've got this interesting story, why would they not hire you? But I don't know. It's like maybe there's a romance to the physical writing part that people want to imagine, but that's just not how the sausage is made, huh?
No. But the thing is, the author does not have to be the writer. There's a couple of ways I like to think about it. The first is, if you're a business owner, you've got your books. You've got your balance sheet, you've got your income statement, you've got all of these different really important books that you have inside of your business. They're your books. They represent your information inside of your business, revenue, profit, loss, etc. Does it make sense for you to be the one who's in there going line by line with your calculator or inside of Excel or Google Sheets or whatnot? Now, maybe if you have an accounting background and that's your thing. If it's not, you better delegate that to a professional who does that every day as their thing, because they will do your books the best way they could be done. Even though it's a creative endeavor, when it comes to writing a book, it's very similar. If you are an adept writer and that is your thing, it may make sense for you to leave that on your plate. But for most authors, I'll tell you, even authors who have authored and written the book themselves, their first or second or third book. In one case, a fellow, he sold 500,000 copies of his first book. He hired me to ghostwrite his second book because he did not want to go through that process again.
It's a beast. I will be the first one to admit it. It takes years off your life, unless it's like you, where you do it as a business and you've got a process. But as someone like me, who was a terrible student, had no writing experience, learned on the fly. I have to say, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of scars. And I really do think that if it was today and I knew someone like you, I don't see how, because I spent a ton of money already on hiring people and it never worked out. So I think today, if I was doing it over, I for sure would have gone the ghost direction. I'm sure I would have.
Yes, and a lot of authors do choose that. There's a paraphrase of a famous quote from Michael Gerber, the E-Myth, that I'd like to put out there, which is along the lines of working on your business, working in your business. I advise authors the following. Don't simply work in your book, work on your book. And that means engaging the highest ROI activities associated with the authorship process, which often are discussing with the publishing professional the best, most unique value promise, your unique selling promise, your unique value promise that you can put out there into the world. And then what is your experience, your stories, your collective advice that you can put out there into the world, and then have the ghostwriter spend those hundreds of hours on the book rather than you, so that it becomes the best it could have been, but you didn't have to put in the time. That's ghostwriting. Someone else does all the work. You get to take all the credit.
Now, the only thing I was going to say is I do love the fact that after all those scars, I actually did it myself. I'll give another quick example to you. My first book did really well. Sold well over 100,000 copies for an investing book from a no-name author. There was going to be a second book, and the first book was a trade publisher, Pearson, Prentice Hall. The second book, okay, got an agent, went around New York City, bidding war, all that kind of fun stuff. HarperCollins paid me a lot of money. So I got to working on the book. I'm going to write the second book. I wrote the first one. I'm also going to write the second one. This is in the late 2000s. It's done. I turn it in. They've already paid me a lot of money. I turn it in and they're like, this isn't going to work. This is terrible. You can't write. We're going to hire a ghostwriter. Now me, I get pissed off. I'm like, okay, what do you want? What do you want exactly? I was kind of modeling it after my first book, which had been a bestseller. So what do you want exactly? They told me what they wanted. And I went back to the shop, so to speak. And 3 months later, I got it right. That book became a bestseller too. But I got to tell you, once again, I'm sharing all this with you and the audience. It wasn't easy and it could have failed. It could have failed big time because I did not have experience. I was rolling the dice. It was all passion. It was all piss and vinegar and all balls, but it really wasn't a process. You know what I mean?
Yes. I'm curious, Michael, what was the specific feedback that HarperCollins gave you, the editor, that made them say it was terrible?
It was a true life story, a trading story about this particular trader and his students. It was a real life story, nonfiction kind of real life story. My first book, I put together somewhat like a textbook. It was a textbook publisher, kind of cut and dry, and it was not a narrative. HarperCollins said, look, don't just make this boring 12 chapters, whatever. Give us a narrative. Give us something that feels like a movie, the through line. That was the challenge for me. It's like, okay, I got to learn how to write a narrative really fast. That was the deal.
There you go. I see that often where there's not necessarily, we've all heard the product market fit. I would even go further and say product market messaging fit. But in the case of authorship, you want to make sure you've got product author voice market fit, where the sort of book that you're writing is one that makes sense for the market of readers that you're releasing to. For example, a lot of your popular, any type of a self-help title, self-help crossover, whether it's a business topic or a personal development or leadership or management, if you're wanting to reach the broadest audience possible of readers, well, you got to make sure it doesn't read like a textbook, unless you're writing a textbook, in which case you want to sound like a textbook.
Yeah, it's spot on. Let me ask you, give a great example or walk me through. You could even use me, but how do you do the intake for you gathering information? You've talked about some of the work, the pre-market research on Amazon, but I guess me as an author, maybe I come your way in the future for book number 10 or something, but how do you get the voice right? What's your process for getting the voice right, especially for those people that might have a real worry about that? They're like, Joshua's a smart guy. He's done this for a lot of people. How do you make sure that author feels like That sounds like me.
As far as I know, I'm the only ghostwriter in the world who uses software to study each author's voice. And I call this a voice print. Relatively, we each have our own unique fingerprints. We each have our own unique communication style, our own turn of the phrase, the different way we use active voice or passive voice, whether we like to use sentence fragments as kind of a staccato to a thought, or if we like to have very uniform sentence structure, subject, verb. And each sentence is 8 to 20 words on average, not a whole lot of variation. Other authors are very kinesthetic. They describe how things feel. Others like to describe how things look or how they sound. And I study all of that for each author so that the result literally is them on the page. Unlike the book I was looking at last night, where it was written by a high energy author, but it read like it was written by a medical student, which it was. So it was an authentic representation of medical school students' voice as opposed to the author's.
Is this something proprietary of yours or is it third party? Speak to that process to the extent you can. I don't think anyone's going to be able to steal your secret sauce, but I'm a little more curious about the details there, if you can share.
It's proprietary in that I don't license it, but the various tools that I use are pretty simple. And it's merely I guess you could call it a checklist of all the things that make up an author's unique voice. Like I was saying, are they an auditory or a visual or a kinesthetic communicator? And so I will look for those sorts of words. What are the most common words that they tend to use? Where do they put adverbs in a sentence? Do they have a variety of sentence openers? Will they begin with an adverb or a prepositional phrase? Are they the sort of people that like to ask hypothetical questions as opposed to simply stating the facts? And all of this together makes an author's unique voice print. And by studying that, I'm not forcing my voice onto them, but rather I'm becoming them on the page so I can sound like them. But because I'm the ghostwriter, I'm the third party, I come from the world of how do we write a commercially viable book, it can become the best version of their book. And I've noticed that even for authors who are completely capable of writing the book themselves, it feels like a daunting task. It's a sort of writer's block paradox, wherein they literally have libraries of information in their heads that they could consult from to write their book. Yet, there they are at 5 a.m., then 6 a.m., then 7, then 7:15 a.m., still staring at the blinking cursor after typing out a page, backspace, backspace, backspace. Typing out another page, nope, backspace, backspace, Control Alt, Control Alt Delete, all of that. There's no right way to say all the things that they want to say. That situation is typically where it makes sense to bring in a ghostwriter, when there's so much you want to say, but aren't sure what to say first, what to say second, what to say third, and have it actually be good. I've been down this path with the independent authors and traditionally published authors, and there's specific things we do, templates, best practices, checklists, we follow every single time.
How and when did you decide? You must have done a certain number of ghosts and then you decided, let's make this a business. How and when did you decide to take this very specific process approach and put it in motion where you could handle so many authors? How did that unfold?
This has been my 10th year in business. I'm going into my 11th year here shortly. At the very beginning, I was kind of like a hired gun. In this case, it would be the freelancer for hire. I would write anything and everything. It was important to me to become sufficiently self-employed at the time when I was in college. I would do anything. I would ghostwrite anything. I'd write anything. I'd edit anything from e-commerce product descriptions to resumes and cover letters to the occasional book here or there. But after my first, I guess you could say half stint in business of my first 5.5, 6 years, I began to realize I was kind of stuck in the typical feast or famine cycle where you're working on all these projects and then when they're done, you're looking for more. So you're going, income 1 month, not a whole lot the next month, income the next month. It wasn't as consistent as it needed to be. And so I reconsidered the type of work I was doing. What tends to be the best for me and build a sustainable business? Well, it was ghostwriting. And it was ongoing ghostwriting that's not just ghostwriting books, but ghost blogging, which I do quite a bit of for clients. It's ghost marketing, where I'm creating emails and search and optimize articles on an ongoing basis in the voice of the brand or of the author. And there are even some where I'm ghostwriting their book and I'm ghostwriting their online course material and I'm ghostwriting their marketing communications. And it's kind of this complete, I guess you could say, all-in-one ghost experience.
Let me give you a softball example. It's kind of how I found you. I've been a fan of Scott Adams' Twitter feed for a while, regardless of what someone thinks. And he's going to come down on the political spectrum where probably half the people like him and half the people don't like him. But if you put the politics aside, the thing to take from Scott Adams, from my perspective, two things. His critical thinking is pretty damn brilliant, and his understanding of persuasion is pretty damn brilliant. I can't tell you, and I'm not going to try and say right now, how many things he has taught me, but quite a few. Really interesting guy, obviously terribly successful. That's the setup. But you ended up working with him on a project. Why don't you talk about that?
It was a little project that was kind of spontaneous, actually. I believe this past summer it was. He had come up with the concept of the digital bill of rights, where because of social media censorship and shadow banning and all this stuff, he put out there, I thought, wow, this is pretty spectacular. Now, he had praised my work before, and I wanted to pay it forward a little bit to him. I followed my typical process, and I, frankly, ghost wrote a first bill of rights, digital bill of rights, kind of codified, you might say. And then that was published on one of these open source platforms for document sharing. And he shouted it out on one of his periscopes. He's like, hey, this is spectacular. Joshua Lisec is a professional writer, and it shows. That was a nice little shout out. And every time he mentions me or my work, it ends up being an influx of business. And that was great. We initially connected, actually, when we talked about a political topic. He had me on and he interviewed me. He casually mentioned my work. And then this past summer, I wanted to do a little bit of pro bono, pay it forward a little bit. It was so good that he thought it was worthy of mentioning, and then it ended up on an open source file sharing website. That was a great little time.
He's a really interesting guy. I think because the politics in America gets so divided, and maybe this is one of the reasons some people don't like him, is they know how effective he is. He's an effective guy. Hey, speak to the audience out there, and I hear this with friends and associates sometimes, and they want to just get something out there. They don't care how many copies they sell. They just kind of want to see their name in print and have some book on Amazon. I've never thought myself that that's such a wise strategy. I've kind of thought, well, gosh, if you're going to do it, why are you going to half-ass it? If you really just want a business card, go get a new business card. But if you're going to write a book, do a book. Why don't you speak to those people that have this business card mindset with books and maybe persuade them that that's the wrong path?
Well, a good way to dismantle that analogy is to think about what you actually do with business cards. In my case,
throw them away.
They throw them away. Do you want your legacy in the garbage can? Do you want the tome that is your life's work collecting dust on the shelf, never even opened, in the same way that all business cards sit in a little business card container years later? Oh, yeah, I remember meeting that person. Dang, I don't even remember who that face is. I don't even remember this or that, or how did I get this? That's not at all the sort of persuasive effect you want to have on your market. That's why I go into engagement with authors, whether it's a 300-page book or a 300-word email, thinking from a persuasion perspective, deciding what outcome it is we want to create for the reader, what action would we like them to take, and then we simply work backwards to the sort of linguistic tools necessary to get that job done. And I've done this to great effect for my authors. In fact, one of them, I have a confidentiality agreement with most of them, but one of them, an online entrepreneur, quite successful, quite popular, actually rabid raving fans in her tribe. Her name is Bushra Azar. She authored a book called Mass Persuasion Method a few years ago. Instant success, many copies sold in her case, and it grew her business light years ahead of where she would have been without the book. She even did a 45-minute kind of testimonial / case study with me about what the process was like and what the book meant to her business. She even pointed out the fallacy of the business card book philosophy, where she actually wants the book in people's hands, being read, and then moving readers to become customers of hers, which we did. The book was essentially set up as an on-ramp into some of her higher priced, higher ticket products, programs, and even done-for-you services. That's how the biggest names make the most revenue from their books. It's using the books as a tool to reach a wider market than their business otherwise would have. You become the news by having this exciting new book to be interviewed about, where if you're just marketing your business, you're marketing, you're advertising, you're not becoming the news. Authorship enables you to become the news, to talk about your business, to talk about your idea. And the title and the subtitle should get across the value of your brand. And we talked about that new tool. You want the title in someone's mind to reflect how they will experience your products and services later on down the line. Book is a tool that should create higher value clients for you because you're now the perceived authority. You've accrued massive credibility to your brand by writing this masterpiece of a manuscript. You're frankly the go-to expert because you wrote the book. And of course, it has to be good. And by good, I mean an example like this. Bushra's book, Mass Persuasion Method. Earlier this year, it was selected by bookauthority.org voters that included, interestingly enough, Tim Ferriss, Jim Collins, and Warren Buffett from bookauthority.org, and their polls, the top 100 persuasion books of all time. Mass Persuasion Method was ranked number 4 of all time, right behind Robert Cialdini's book, Persuasion, at number 3.
That's what you want. I mean, look, I know you're giving a great example, and that's exactly what you want. It's a great case study. Like I said, at the very top here and throughout this conversation, I wish that I would have, even though I've done books already, maybe I'll be coming your way in the future. You're kind of selling me in the course of this conversation as well. Very cool stuff. I appreciate you coming on, sharing some insights. Look, I know you're cradle to grave too. People need to understand that what they're going to get from working with you is not only, and you just laid that out, it's not only let me write the book for you. It's going to be a lot of mentoring and a lot of understanding that goes along the whole cycle of this process. And it is a cycle. There's a cycle to this process.
Exactly. The definition of the most unique value that they can present to the marketplace, that process of creating the title and the subtitle and the blurb for the book ultimately leads to updating website copy and marketing communications and other shifts, because for the first time, you have codified the most important thing you deliver to your market, which takes the form of the promise in your title and subtitle, therefore spills over into everything else. Now that you have that extreme clarity on the unique value proposition that you have.
And by the way, for budding authors out there, I've worked with 4 publishers. These are not the conversations you have with publishers. This is not the assistance you get from a publisher. Forget it. I don't know if you concur, but I've not had any experience of these kinds of conversations with a publisher.
No, I haven't. In fact, one of the big 5 publishers, I taught their acquisitions editor how to use search engine optimization, keyword research software. They had never considered the possibility of actually using simple keyword research to identify what topics should not go in the book. They had previously followed instinct. There is a better way. Even what is a best practice of internet marketing, keyword research, completely unknown to some of the biggest publishers handing out the biggest advances literally on the planet, even having had New York Times bestselling books. So we all have something to learn from everyone. And that's why I position myself not simply as a ghostwriter, but in the words of my clients, they referred to me as their ghost marketer, their ghost strategist. One even called me his ghost CMO, ghost therapist. I hear that a lot because of the emotionally cathartic experience of authorship and sharing stories with someone who can interpret them in the best way for the general public. And now I've been kind of known as the ghost persuader because of a lot of the work I do behind the scenes, helping authors find the best way to say everything they want to say from a marketing perspective, from an advertising perspective, from a PR perspective, because it all flows out of the process. And yes, I use the Jobs to Be Done framework because it works. because it works. It's not my framework, but hey, if you find something that works, it can only get worse if you try to reinvent it.
The reason I wanted to have you on today, obviously, is, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but the reason I wanted to have you on today is for this perspective of writing a book. So sure, it's a great platform for you, and I hope some of my listeners, hopefully some quality ones, come your way and want to use you. But for me, as an objective guy, it was, let's have a conversation. Let's get out there. All these different issues that go into a book. I appreciate you coming on and just kind of sharing with me objectively what is best practices in 2020 for going about a book. And I think you did a great job of that. So I appreciate you coming on. Hey, where can we send people that can find you on Twitter and all that stuff? What's the best website for you, Joshua?
Depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for my hot takes on everything from writing and publishing to the occasional insight into how the sausage is made in Hollywood, in Washington, D.C., given some of my previous clients, you can find me on Twitter at Joshua Lisec. If you're more so the tutorial type and you want to know, hey, tell me more about the how-to, Joshua, that'd probably be my YouTube channel. I have over 170 trainings now on my YouTube channel. Simply YouTube search Joshua Lisec and you'll find me there. But if you'd like to chat with me, say, hey, Joshua, talk. Is my book any good? Am I going to be one of those ones you tell, never write this book? That would be important to know. Probably the best place to do that is to book a chat with me at entrepreneurswordsmith.com/book. Entrepreneurs is plural, Word and Smith. Well, simply Word and Smith. And it's a free session with me.
Joshua, cool stuff. I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we can talk again in the future.
It's been my pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.